I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off-road. The guy managed the group. He was like, what are you doing in this beautiful car? I'm like, I'm going off-road. He's like, are you sure? Because you can use one of ours. And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability, as well as its robust interior, are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
Sometimes it takes a different approach to help you unlock your true potential. Capella University's game-changing FlexPath format helps you learn at your own pace and fit earning a degree into your life. From before you enroll to after you graduate, you'll be supported by people who are invested in your success so you can pursue your goals knowing that help is available if you need it. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
Hey, James here. I am so excited. 5 years ago, I started this podcast, and even before I released episode 1 of this podcast, I interviewed one of the smartest people on the planet, I think, one of my favorite authors, Robert Greene. He wrote The 48 Laws of Power. He wrote Mastery. He wrote so many great books. I highly recommend all of his books. Listen to my podcast with him from 2014. We're re-releasing the very first podcast I did with him, and soon we'll have another podcast with him, hopefully. So just such a genius. I'm excited to re-release this podcast from 5 years ago. It still holds up today. One thing I will say he told me in this podcast, and there was just so many things in the podcast that were just unique and special to the podcast, but he said, everybody has a different process and a different journey. Some people come to me and say, I have no idea what my passion is. And then he described how you start developing your passion. You'll hear that in this podcast. But basically, for the next 370 podcasts with such amazing, excellent peak performers from every industry, I dive down on these questions that Robert Greene and I spoke about in this very first podcast. So enjoy listening to this re-release and let me know what you think on Twitter.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network.
This is James Altucher, and I'm here with one of my all-time favorite authors, Robert Greene, the author of not only Mastery, but the 48 Laws of Power, The Art of Seduction, and several other books, publications, everything. Robert, you're like one of the smartest people I've ever spoken to. When you read your books, there are so many examples and so much research. It makes me, I'm intimidated by the number of, there must be like 500 biographies in all of your books.
Generally, I read about 200 or 300 books to make one book. I've read probably over thousands of biographies.
What was like the last biography you've read? Just so I know what to read tomorrow.
I don't know. I'm preparing for my next book. I actually just read Phil Jackson's new book called 11 Rings. So that might be the last biography I've read.
What's the next book about? And then I want to actually start talking about your last book, which is called Mastery. But what's your next book about?
Well, in Mastery, I have a chapter on what I call social intelligence. It's chapter 4, and I'm basically expanding that into an entire book. And I'm going to give you sort of what I call the laws of human nature. These go back thousands of years. It's sort of looking at us humans as if we're sort of animals that behave according to particular patterns of behavior. And I'm going to give you kind of a code book so that you can understand the weird behavior of the people that you deal with. That's sort of the general idea.
Well, I want to dive into that a little bit more because I sort of feel that's a prevailing theme of all of your books, which is social intelligence. But you mentioned specifically code book. What's an example code here that you're gonna dive into?
Well, sometimes let's say you're trying to persuade somebody to fund your project, and they seem interested, and then like 2 weeks later, they're not suddenly interested, and you wonder what's going on, and you assume that they lost interest, they're not a good person, something is wrong, or they're just an ass, if I can say that here. And, you go through these kind of emotional reactions, and I'm going to show you that, in fact, probably what's happening is, first of all, people are very flighty. We all experience a moment of enthusiasm, and then 10 minutes later we don't feel that same way. But more generally, what happens is you've not been getting at their self-interest. You're not appealing to something. They no longer see what's in it for them. They were initially excited, but they aren't. So I'm going to show you, dependent on what it is that you're reading from them, not just their coolness, but other signs, what is happening so that you can now plan your next attack and maybe include something that will sort of perk up their interest more because they'll see that they're going to get something out of it. It's that kind of thing. I could give you 100 more examples, but I haven't written the book yet, so it's all in my head.
It reminds me a little of Robert Cialdini's book on influence and how he basically looks at evolutionary techniques and how those are used to influence people.
I read that book, I think, years ago for Seduction. It's an excellent book, and I think I used it a bit in Seduction. Definitely, though.
Well, again, it reminds me also of, not only in Seduction, but 48 Laws of Power, those two books in particular, but also in Mastery, how a lot of what you talk about in Mastery is social intelligence, is how we communicate ideas and influence other people. What's the role of that in general in Mastery? Let's say percentage-wise, if you were to break out all the components of mastering a topic.
I don't know. It's more like 20-25% of the game. So let's say that you're somebody who's really brilliant. You're like an Einstein. You're a tech genius or a business genius, but you've got really bad people skills. You're kind of pushy. You don't listen. I could go on and on.
Thanks for describing me, by the way.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know you, so I didn't mean it personally.
No, I'm just kidding.
You're negating all of your talent. So all of that, going to Princeton and getting your degree and all that hard work is completely neutralized by your horrific people skills. And so when I wrote the book, I believe that people nowadays who have real skill, who've mastered a craft of any kind, are going to be running the world in the future. But it's not just about being a great nerd. We're a social animal. Everything you do involves other people. You're always continually having to sell your ideas. And if you're terrible at it, you're just going to have a life of misery. And in my books, I have examples of people who were highly talented and who were miserable because they couldn't deal with people, like Nikola Tesla in the 48 Laws of Power, one of the greatest geniuses that ever lived, but he was just awful with people. And then I have in my new book this Dr. Semmelweis in the 19th century, who could have been greater than Louis Pasteur, but he offended everybody that he came in contact with. So, it's not everything. It's not all about being political and being a bullshit artist and knowing how to charm people. That has its limitations too. But depending on what field you are in, you have to have some degree of awareness of people, how they're thinking, how to get inside their minds and imagine what their perspective is. So it's a critical part. And one other thing I mentioned, like you asked me, like a code book type thing. There'll be a typical scenario where you just entered a workplace or some new environment, and suddenly somebody is super friendly to you, and it just sort of takes you off guard, and you're kind of charmed and seduced by them. It doesn't have to be a sexual thing. It's just a colleague or a friend. And really what's happening probably is they have a degree of envy of you. They're setting you up for some kind of negative action, because people generally are a little wary when they first meet each other. So somebody who's super overly friendly on a first encounter is a sign of something wrong. So these are the kinds of things that I'm going to help you decipher.
That's very interesting. It reminds me a little in your seduction book of the technique where you build someone up when you meet them, so that gives you ammunition to take them down later and have them drawn towards you once you take them down.
Yes, it's a particularly nasty seduction technique. It's like, I call it, it's creating a wound in the other person. So you're sort of doing a hot and cold thing where you get them a little bit under your influence, and then you pull back, or you say something a little bit biting, but you follow it up with being kind of warm and friendly. It really puts people off balance. Very powerful seductive technique.
I want to circle back to that, but first I want to talk about Mastery of It, which is just a brilliant book. I highly recommend it for everybody. And let's get to specifics. Like, the book has so many extensive examples, and you don't really say, here's how to master something A, B, and C. I mean, you provide lots of A, B, and C's all over the book, which is I think great. But you talk about apprenticeship. You talk about, the various ways then you break away from apprenticeship to form your own creativity. Maybe describe a little bit, if you were going to give someone the 5-minute summary of how to master a topic, what would be the most important factors to look at?
Well, the most important factor is chapter 1 in the book, and you're never going to master something unless you understand this. The brain is designed to learn. We learn much better when we're emotionally engaged, when we want to learn, when we're motivated, when we feel the need to learn. I compare it to, let's say you want to learn, you have to learn French, and if it's like in the university and it's something you have to study, in 1 year you're not going to learn very much. But if you're in France and your girlfriend is French and you need to get a job and you need to speak French, because you're there and you're motivated, you're going to learn like 20 times faster. That's just how the brain works.
What's happening there, though, is at first you find the girl, rather than first you say to yourself, I want to get good at French.
Yeah, that could be. But the point that I'm making is that when you're motivated to learn something, you have to learn it. You're going to learn much faster. So you're in France and you met this great girl, but she speaks no English, and you've got to be able to learn French in order to communicate and seduce her. You're so highly motivated that you're going to learn, I said 10 times, 20, 50 times faster than the university student back in New York or wherever you're studying. So the thing is, a lot of people go wrong. They choose a career because it's about money. I have nothing against money. We all have to make a living. But let's say you go into law because that's what your parents are pushing you into and other people, and it seems lucrative, but you yourself aren't personally excited by it. You're going to start tuning out. You're not going to learn very fast. After 10 years, you're going to burn out. You're never going to become a master because it takes 10,000 hours. You've probably all heard about that 10,000 hours. It's a brilliant study. It's just a number, but let's say it is pretty real. It could be 9,000, 11,000. You're never going to have the patience. You're never going to be able to put in the 10 years or more studying something unless you really are excited about it, unless there's some kind of personal commitment to it. So it's by far the most important thing. It's that choice of the career. It doesn't mean you have to know exactly what you want to be when you're 21 years old and then go pursue it. It's going to be a process that might take you 5-10 years to figure out exactly what that is. For me, as a writer, it took me 15 years to find out I should be writing books like the kind that I write. It's going to take time. But if you don't make that first step, if you go into the wrong field, you're never going to become a master. You're never going to last long enough. So that's like, that's the first thing.
And I think a big question that many people have is, how do I find the thing that I'm passionate about? Now, you mentioned 5 to 6 years or 15 years in your case, in terms of wanting to be a writer. But what is that process by which someone finds what they're motivated enough to be a master about?
Well, everybody has a different process, a different journey. Some people know pretty clearly what it was when they were young. I met a woman who interviewed me. She knew that she wanted to be a writer when she was a young girl, and then she got into law, and it was a dead end, and she hated it, and she finally figured it out that she had to go back at the age of 31 to what she really loved. So there are going to be people like that. But there are others, and they come to me and they say, I have no idea what my passion is. I have no idea what I really love. And that's troubling, because that means you're not listening to yourself. You're not aware of your own likes and dislikes. You've been paying too much attention to what other people are saying. So you have to go through a process now of kind of looking at yourself. I've worked as a consultant. I've dealt with people, many people, who say that to me. They say, I'm 35, I'm 40. I don't know what it is that I was meant to do. I really have no idea. Okay, let's go back and let's look at your childhood. Let's look at the things that excited you. Let's look at maybe where you went wrong. Let's look at the things that you hate. If you hate working for a large company, if you hate politicking, you're probably meant to be an entrepreneur, to be working for yourself on some level. Let's look at the things that when you open the newspaper or go online, these subjects really excite you, make you kind of like a child again, where you want to learn about it. And slowly through, could take a couple months, could take a year, I don't know, depends on the person. You're reconnecting to what I call a voice inside of you that you had when you were a kid that drew you to certain activities and you've lost touch with. I could go on for 4 hours about the process that I've dealt with consulting, but it's basically not going to be overnight. You're not going to wake up and go, I should have been a doctor, and I went into the... No, it doesn't like that. It takes time, but it is so worth it.
So after that first realization that, okay, I'm motivated to be a writer, or I'm motivated to discover, more uses of electricity, or to be an internet entrepreneur, or whatever it is, what would you say is the next step?
Well, first of all, if you're 22 and you're about to enter your career world, it's not going to be like it won't be like I know this is exactly where I have to head. It's usually a matter of I like this field, the sciences, or I like sports or whatever. A general category of things that you're going to pursue. For me, it was writing, and so when I was 21, I decided I'd go into journalism as a way to make a living and train myself as a writer. So you're going to make a choice of something to start with that is somewhat related to that field that you love. And it can be kind of general. It could just be the tech world, or it could be a certain kind of business. It doesn't have to be that specific. But you've got to make the right choice. And once you get in there, I'm telling you that you want to think of your 20s as your apprenticeship. Now, we don't use that word anymore, and it's a shame that we don't. We all go through usually the school system, the education system, where we're all kind of guided, and there are teachers there to help us. Now, there's nobody there to do anything for you. Maybe your parents, but really nobody's there to guide you in this new part of your life. So you're creating your own apprenticeship. And that apprenticeship means you're going to learn skills It's not about making money. If you are 22 and you're obsessed with making money, you're never going to really make a lot of money. It's kind of a perverse law of human nature that I'm going to discuss. The people who end up making the most amount of money are usually motivated by something else. And the classic example is Steve Jobs, somebody who from very early on was clearly not very interested in money, and look where he ended up. So you're choosing something that appeals to you, and then now you're open. You're on I call it a journey, and you're going to discover, I like what I'm doing here, but there's something better for me. It's not exactly right. I knew that journalism after 3 years wasn't really right for me. So I went into a different kind of writing. Well, you'll figure, all right, I'll go into a different line of work, a different business, still related. And as you do this, you're going to be accumulating skills, experiences. You're going to be observing people. You're going to get political, social skills. And by the time you're 31, you're going to own the world. You're going to have a lot of experience, and then you'll be able to figure out how to combine everything that you've learned into something great, something that really appeals to you. And I give examples in the book. There's a guy, I interviewed contemporary masters. One of us, Paul Graham, who started a company called Y Combinator, which is like a entrepreneur system for tech people in Silicon Valley. It's worth billions of dollars. And he is the same thing. He didn't realize until he was 31, I think 30, what it was that he was meant to do. But in his 20s, he did all of these amazing experiences that served as a foundation for what ended up being this great tech business that he created for Netscape back in the 90s. So be prepared not to necessarily strike gold when you're 25 or 26. It's going to take some time, but if you think of it as your own education that you yourself are in charge of, you're going to be a lot better off than people who just wander around and just choose any career.
Robert, I think this is a really important message now, even from an economics point of view, just because what we're seeing is kind of the disintegration of the middle class. And the middle class was formed by the conformity of the traditional school system, the conformity of traditional corporatism, where everybody feels that they're safe in their cubicle and they could rise up and get promotions and so on. People now have to essentially, whether it's become masters or become close to masters, they have to take charge of their economic lives, which means they have to do something they're motivated by and they're interested in. Even if they don't put in their 10,000 hours, they kind of have to take control of their own lives. And that's why I think this message has become critically important in today's society.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I can look at my father. He worked at the same company for 40 years, and they were loyal to him, and he was loyal to them. And it's not that long ago that world existed, that people would work at one place and things were sort of taken care of. But that's just been blown away, obliterated, probably by the internet, by other things going on. It's you might as well be the era of the dinosaur. Right. And you cannot rely on, you know that company you're working for now, they'll probably downsize you the first opportunity they can, or as soon as you reach a certain age, they'll replace you with somebody who's cheaper. That's just the nature of it. I'm not saying it's good. I wish it weren't that way, but my books are about realists, or being realistic, and that's just the nature of it. So yeah, you got to take control of your own life and craft an apprenticeship. Now, that you mentioned the 10,000 hour, it doesn't mean, I want to clear up a misconception here. It doesn't mean that you are you're playing chess for 10,000 hours and then you become a master or medicine or whatever. Those 10,000 hours could come from different things you have done in your life. So, for instance, this woman that I mentioned, who spent her 20s in law and realized it was the wrong thing, she decided when it was finished that what she would do was become a writer, but become a writer about legal issues, which was a very brilliant move on her part. So now all of that legal experience added up to 3,000-4,000 hours already of writing, of experience about legal matters. And then when she started getting into journalism, now the hours are piling up. you can take that time that you think you wasted doing something else, and you're going to apply it to something that really appeals to you, and suddenly all of that experience enters into the practice. I did a lot of really bad jobs myself because as a writer I wanted a lot of experience. I did construction work, etc. And all of those jobs taught me about people and about weird power situations and about the games bosses play in all different kinds of careers, all of which I used for the 48 Laws of Power. So you can be 35 and you're not going to go, oh, damn it, I can't do 10,000 hours. My life's screwed. No, you've already probably done 5,000 hours. Now you've got to find a way to apply it in a way that's appropriate and personal.
So that's a great way to look at it. It's almost like your past. Don't view it as, you've messed up or whatever, but basically, how have you built these prior hours as a safety net that you could then use to build either mastery or close to mastery so that you can make that leap from the corporate job or the job that you're not really that excited about to something that you are more excited about. Not everyone's a Mozart, but everyone can use the hours that they've built up to build some sort of safety net for themselves if they apply your techniques. What is the relationship between mastery and happiness? Because many of the examples you use, and in fact, you used the example earlier of Steve Jobs, but also let's throw in, Mozart and Napoleon and so on. And Tesla, these people did not end up as happy people for, by and large. So,
well, I would really much take issue with that. I mean, Steve Jobs, he was a tempestuous person who was sort of had a very obsessive personality. But I would say, judging on the biography, the last 12 years of his life must have been immensely satisfying. And there are people, it depends on your definition of happiness. So the book is called Mastery. It's not called Happiness. If I wanted to write a book on happiness, I would say, go take drugs and hang out in Peru on a hilltop or something. That's not what my book is about. But I'll say that I am making the point that everybody has creative potential. Everybody, I believe. And I think the worst feeling in life comes from the sense as you get older that you didn't somehow tap that potential. You're not expressing what you think you could have expressed. And I think it really makes a lot of people very, very unhappy. Mozart had a pretty great life when he finally left his father. He died young, but I would certainly claim he was pretty happy. I don't think a lot of these people who we see as very driven are necessarily unhappy. They do spend a lot of time with their work, and they are maybe obsessive. But that kind of attention to detail, to doing what you love, brings a sense of satisfaction that comes that maybe isn't the same satisfaction that you might get from an immediate rush of going to a party. It's a different kind of happiness. It's something a little more like a fulfillment. And I believe actually that mastery is the path towards that. And I have a quote in there from Da Vinci, which I love, which is basically just as a day when you've worked hard brings a blessed sleep, a life in which you've fulfilled what you're doing brings a blessed death. I'm quoting it horribly, but the idea is if you felt like you realized your potential, you almost feel like you can die a happy person, sort of thing.
You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across
football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get two memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply.
I created this idea called Generation W. It's all about educating, inspiring, connecting women. And it's about building community at the same time. It's not like women are on some outpost somewhere, right? Just like no ethnic people are on some outpost there. People of color, right? We're all together. So if we learn how to appreciate each other, we elevate one, we elevate us all. And so for the first year, that's where we started. And we had 700 people show up. They had no idea what they were showing up to, but they loved it. And they said, we want more.
So I want to circle back to the one of your earlier books, which was on seduction, and this is also related to 48 Laws of Power, where essentially you give lots of not necessarily techniques, but different types of ways in which people can use, and I'll use the word manipulation to get what they want. And what I'm wondering is, often in manipulation, the manipulator is viewed as having power, and the person he's manipulating is viewed as the weaker person. But in reality, it's most likely reversed. The reason you have to manipulate is because you are the weaker person. And if manipulation continues, don't you think some anxiety results from the person being manipulated that ultimately backfires on the manipulator?
Well, can you give me an example? It's also general. It's kind of hard to get my teeth into. It's kind of general that way.
Well, let's say I'm in a relationship with a girl, and I'm constantly pulling back or, withholding affection in order to get her to do things I want. I'm not saying I do this. I'm just saying this is a type of seduction. You've mentioned it in your book. This type of seduction. Eventually, the other side of that is going to get sick and tired of it.
Well, then, if they do get sick and tired of it, you're a bad seducer. I mean, what is your goal? The goal is in the seduction game is to actually seduce the person, which means you either you sleep with them or you have a relationship, depending on what you want. Well, at a certain point, you stop playing hot and cold because it's no longer effective, because, as you say, they're going to see through it and they're going to get tired of it. So you see, this is the problem people have. It's a book. I can't be there in the room with you and talk to you as you read it. But the problem people have sometimes is you take things too literally, and it's also maybe a fault of my own in the kind of books that I write. It's not the reader's fault necessarily, but the whole thing of seduction is how outward you are. You're sensitive to the other person. You've got these antennae that are invisible, and you're hearing and listening and sensing that they're getting exasperated with you, that they're falling for you, that this is what's happening. And you gauge what you do depending on what you're picking up from them. So if you were an experienced seducer, if that's what you wanted to be, you're not just simply applying a strategy from the art of seduction. You're watching the other person and entering their spirit, which is one of the titles of the chapters, and kind of thinking what they might be thinking. And, okay, this is what's appropriate here. And then, the word manipulation, I'm not going to run away from it. The books, both of those books you mentioned, many of the chapters or laws deal with what we would call manipulation, but when you're trying to start a relationship, let's say with a woman, you put effort into things. You dress maybe a little more nicely. You take her to nice places. You put an effort into it. And the woman sees this effort and is charmed and seduced by it because it means you're thinking of the other person as an individual, not as just like 1,000 other people you've met. That's what makes it so seductive. So is that manipulation? It's really kind of courtship. And a lot of women will end up complaining that men don't make any effort. So the opposite of seduction is like making no effort, just being yourself, just being kind of sloppy, just sort of taking her to Pizza Hut and watching a football game kind of thing. I don't deny that some of it's manipulation, but some of it is just the fact that you're showing that other person that you're playing this kind of courtship game, and it's supposed to be pleasurable. It's not supposed to be...
And Robert, just to be clear, it's definitely not your fault as an author. It's definitely my own idiosyncrasies as I read through this and relate to my own experiences. So trust that.
The way the books are written, sometimes they can be taken the wrong way, and everybody brings their own personal experience to it. So I've discovered that people who've been manipulated by somebody else, who've been the victim of someone that we would call sociopathic, they read my books in a much different way from others that haven't. So everybody brings their own world to it, and I guess that's a good thing. But it's I try to make it clear in the preface and in the writing that you have to not just follow what I'm saying in a literal fashion. You have to kind of be in the moment and be alive to what the other person is doing. And maybe what I'm writing about is completely inappropriate to your circumstances. So please don't do what I'm writing here, because it'll get you in trouble.
So now, Robert, you've put in the billion hours, gazillion hours to master writing. You're working on your next book. You've done a bunch of great books. What is, and sorry for the basic question, but basically, what's a day in the life like? Like, how do you continue your mastery every day of writing?
Well, it's not horribly glamorous. It's a lot of research, and the writing is actually maybe 1/3 of the process. So I'll go for a year or more just researching and organizing my thoughts and the research material, and then I write. So it's different depending on where I am at. Right now, I'm just reading book after book after book and trying to organize my thoughts for this project on human nature that I mentioned. Then when I'm starting to write, I'll just sit and write for like 3 hours or 4 hours a day, and then I'm just like relaxing the rest of the time. And normally I do a lot of exercise and sports. It's how I deal with my stress. But unfortunately, with a broken foot, I'm not able to do that, so I'm kind of going crazy right now.
So you don't really, like, a lot of writers spend a lot of time building their so-called platform, whether it's their Facebook presence, their Twitter presence, their blog. You don't focus too much on that. You're very much focused on what is the next book going to be and how you can improve that.
Yeah, I'm a little, I'm 54. I've got sort of habits. I'm not totally of the social media generation. I'm in, Facebook, and I'm addicted to it like anybody, but I've never... if you talk about mastery, where I tell people to do what they love and to listen to your own voice, I listen to myself, and I get most excited by writing books. I do want to blog more because I actually sort of enjoy it, but I figured out what it is that I like the most, and it's actually creating something, usually a book, and not dissipating my time in 100 different platforms trying to build up an audience, etc. I just find it exhausting and depressing for me. So but I'm fortunate that now I have an audience who've read my other books that I can do that. If I were a young writer just starting out, I wouldn't have that luxury. I'd have to do what you're talking about and, spreading my name out as many different places as I could online and creating a presence. And I'm kind of a dinosaur. There aren't going to be probably many of my type left in the years to come. But I figured if that's my strength, is writing a book, I might as well just do that and then go the way of the brontosaur.
Well, Robert, I have thoroughly enjoyed all of your books. I highly recommend Mastery. I'm really looking forward to the next book, and I'm really glad we had this chance to interview you today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.
I created this idea called Generation W. It's all about educating, inspiring, connecting women. And it's about building community at the same time. It's not like women are on some outpost somewhere, right? Just like no ethnic people are on some outpost there. People of color, right? We're all together. So if we learn how to appreciate each other, we elevate one and we elevate us all. And so for the first year, that's where we started. And we had 700 people show up. They had no idea what they were showing up to, but they loved it. And they said, we want more.